And welcome back to Desert Sky Stitches. My name is Jenny Clark, and today we're going to start on our Autumn Pines paper piecing series. Today what I'd like to go over is kind of the fabric requirements, take a look at the pattern, we'll go over the supplies that are needed, and we'll also start cutting out our papers and our fabric strips. We won't start cutting them down into the small units until we actually get to that unit itself. So today, pattern, cutting our fabric strips, getting everything organized, and getting ready to start cutting out our individual unit pieces. So let's go over to the cutting mat, and I'm going to show you the supplies that you need, and we'll start digging into the pattern. Okay, so the supplies that you're going to need are obviously the pattern. I've already put mine in a binder, but I have all the pages here and sheet protectors. So we need the pattern. We're going to need some flower pins when we start cutting out the papers. We'll need paper clips to clip all the papers to our fabric. I like to use repositionable glue. This is to help put the templates down on the paper to hold them. You'll need a staple remover eventually, not right away. And then I also like to have a pen, a pencil. I got a Sharpie marker to mark on my Ziploc bags. For this pattern, you need 8 Ziploc bags, preferably large gallon size Ziploc bags. That way there's enough room in the bag to fit all your stuff. So 8 gallon size Ziploc bags. Then I went to the website and printed out a colorway, which I kind of want to go over the different parts and pieces and fabrics that are going to be needed. But in addition to supply wise, I suggest that you have at least a 6-inch add a quarter ruler and a fold template, and a 12-inch ruler and a fold template. That we don't need those today for cutting out the fabrics, but these are supplies that you will need for this pattern. And then I like to have kind of a series of rulers. I like Creative Grids rulers. Obviously, it's your choice, whatever rulers, but I like to have my big 8.5 by 24.5 ruler to cut my long strips. And then I have a 2.5 by 18.5 and also a 3.5 by 12.5. These are when I need to cut some smaller pieces. And then obviously a rotary cutter. I like to use the 45 millimeter to cut out my papers, and if it's just like a single layer of fabric. And then I predominantly use my 60 millimeter rotary cutter for cutting out my fabrics, just because you can cut through a lot more layers than just one. And then as just a friendly reminder, you want to make sure you have a nice sharp blade. I just put a new blade on both of my rotary cutters, so I'm all good to go. And then this is another nicety that it helps you trim your blocks and helps you cut out your fabric so you don't have to use the paper template. This is the diamond wedding ring templates. If you plan on making more quilts that have the diamond wedding ring, like such as the diamond wedding star or even the diamond wedding ring quilt itself, these come in so handy. They're made by Creative Grids, and your local quilt shop can get those for you, or you can order them directly from Quiltworx or a certified Quiltworx shop. And also, just in case, because we all know that accidents happen, you might want to also have a roll of Scotch tape close by, because if you accidentally tear your paper when you're cutting it out or moving it around, you have some Scotch tape to fix that up. So those are the supplies. So let's start talking about the fabric requirements a little bit. This is a quilt that you could honestly, if you have a fairly good fabric stash and some scraps, like 2.5-inch strip scraps, you potentially could have enough fabric in your scraps to make this. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this picture, and we'll kind of go individually through each block and go over what the fabric requirements are. So this quilt comprises 4 different sections or units, if you want to call them. We've got the A unit, which is this right here. This is going to be our diamond star arc. So that's your A unit, and there's 4 different pieces. There's a top and a bottom, both right and left, and then you've got these inner background pieces. Then our unit B is going to be this feathered star, and then Section C, Unit C is going to be basically all of the background fabric here. And then Unit D is our border, outer border parts. These are pieced. These are multiple colors in here. And then this outer fabric. So how do we go about getting our fabric and deciding what colors we want to use? This is my tip that I always give to everybody that I'm helping pick out fabrics or design it in. If you have the program Quiltster, you can certainly do that. What I like to do is start out with a outer border fabric. And this, I found this in my stash, this outer, this is what I'm using for my outer border. And then you can pull, see this has pinks and blues and greens and kind of light blue. So you can pull colors out of your background or your outer border to use on the inside. And that's kind of, if you look at this, you know, this has browns and tans, and those are the colors that have been kind of pulled into the inside. So what do we need? For these A units here, this comprises 8 strips, 2.5-inch strips. So if you have an abundant supply of 2.5 jelly roll strips, you could do that. So each color you'll need 1 strip, and they start from the lightest all the way out to the darkest. So there's 8 strips. So you'd be, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You'll need 2.5-inch strips for those. So you can see there's kind of 2 background fabrics. There's a background fabric that kind of is the inside of all these arcs, as well as the background fabric for these feathered stars. That is a different color than the background fabric out in here. You can do it all the same color if you'd like, or you can do the 2 different colors. But if you're doing just this color, what you're going to need is 1 yard of this background color. That's for section C, and also I think it's these corners here. That's your D1 unit, is also the same background color. Then you also have, as part of these A units, you're going to have a top, what I call like the top spike, and then you also have the bottom spike, and then a couple of wings that are on the outer portion. So these sections right here, this darker brown, if you can see there's a lighter brown and a darker brown. The lighter brown, these are outer wings that go on your arc strips. So we need to sew those on when we're making our wedding ring arcs, which are, okay. So as you can see here, we have S1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are your 8 2.5-inch strips, and it goes from light to dark. Then as you assemble these, you're going to have an outer spike and a lower spike. And in the picture, the lower spike actually makes this star in the middle. So if you want like a specific color star, then that would be the color that you would do this lower spike, which is S11. And that is a 4, I believe, a 4-inch strip. So S11 is a 4-inch strip, so you could pull that out of your stash. And then you have S12, which is the outer spike, and you can make that a darker color where it really stands out. The colors in this particular quilt are so close you can't really tell, but it is a darker brown than the other browns in the arcs. And then you'll also have what I call the lower and upper wings. So in S10, you're going to have 2 outer wings, which in the upper, it's this basically the same color brown as what's in the arc. And then in the lower one, you also have S9, which I call those the lower wings. In this quilt, that is what makes kind of that secondary star pattern in the back. So your bottom spike is the star, and then your S9 is going to be what this kind of a orangish red color is. And then we also have some background color in there as well. and that is what they used as S1. So S1, they used the same color as the background color. So really the options are kind of unlimited, and depending on what your scrap pile is, or if you head down to the quilt shop, pick an outer border first and then coordinate all your interior colors. It's not a big quilt, so there's not a huge yardage requirement. These pieces here in the outer border arcs, those are 2-inch strips, but again, you could use 2.5-inch strips out of your stash if you wanted to. This one, there's actually 15 different pieces on there. So on this piece, there's 15, and there's you don't have to go light to dark or anything like that. You just have a good color contrast that goes with your outer border, and you can repeat the colors if you want. You can repeat the colors that are in your arcs as well. But you need 15 2-inch strips out of these colors. And then for your outer border, which is this fabric here, fabric D2, that's 7/8 of a yard. If you wanted to use that color as one of your interior, one of the 2.5-inch strips, and just get a yard instead of 7/8 of a yard. And then background fabric, which is C, that's right, it's a yard because you cut two 16-inch strips. And then you also have to cut another, I believe, 4.5-inch strip for the D unit. Yeah, there's a little blurb here in the pattern that says cut one 4 3/4-inch strip. It's the same background fabric that was used to cut your C units. 1 yard is basically what you need for this background here. 1 yard here. All right, then the inner border here is 1 yard because it's the same fabric as the background for your B feathered star unit. And then this is your this is fabric A2 and A3, which is the same fabric. And altogether, that's 1 yard. So 1 yard of the interior fabric, 1 yard of this background fabric here, 1 yard of your outer border, and a bunch of 2-inch for these, or 2.5 inches. Same with here, 2.5-inch strips, your spike at the top and the bottom, and these orange, that's a 4-inch strip. And then the other color that we haven't gone over yet is what you need for your feathered star here. And you're going to need, the background fabric is included in the 1 yard of what you need. Background for here, background for there, that's all 1 yard. Then the brown for the spikes, or whatever color you end up using, that's 5/8 of a yard. And then in the middle of these B units, you can kind of see there's a dark portion there. That is 1/4 of a yard. That's that dark brown that you see on all of these, in the center of all these. The lighter brown, that's part of your wedding ring arc, or your diamond wedding ring arc. So that, in a nutshell, kind of covers your fabric requirements. I would encourage you to look on the Quiltworx website. You can go to Pinterest. You can go on Facebook. They have a Quiltworx support group that people post pictures in there all the time. You can look and see some other colorways if you have ideas, or it's a wall hanging if you want to match your living room or your bedroom. Pick colors that are pleasing to you, and then go get the fabrics that you need and come back, and we'll start cutting out our fabric strips and our templates and our foundation papers. One last thing about the pattern. This pattern has a couple of corrections, and if you've never went to the Quiltworx website and looked up how to do the corrections, I'll leave a link down below to take you directly to the Autumn Pines pattern. But the way that you do that is you look at the very back page of your pattern, and up in the very corner here, right there, this lower corner, it's going to tell you a published date. So you look at that published date, and then you go and look at the corrections, and if there's anything newer than this published date, that means that there's a correction. Most of the corrections that are on the Quiltworx website are basically mislabeling or a couple of typos. So you might want to just do some pen and ink changes. They do actually give you a whole new page that you can print out. It's a PDF that you can download and reprint the page. If it's just like the change from a 5 to a 6 or something like that, I just do a pen and ink change to save on printing out all those pages. But please do make sure that you check for corrections, because there are some for this Autumn Pines quilt, and it's a good idea to do that with any quilt that you have, just in case Maybe it's mislabeled that the yardage is wrong, so you went and bought all your fabric, and then you get home just to find out that maybe you're a few inches too short on your fabric that you need, and that was a mistake that you didn't check the corrections or whatever. So make sure you do that. Make a regular habit of doing that when you start working on a new pattern. So let's continue. When it comes to getting the bags ready, what I'll usually do is go through the pattern. It tells you at each chapter what bag you should have. So we need 8 bags. This is just a regular address label, 1 inch by 2 5/8, compatible with Avery 5160. I just got a big box of these at Staples. I use these all the time. That way you don't have to write on your actual Ziploc bag. You can just put a label on there, and then you can peel the label off and reuse the bags for a different project. So just wanted to add that as another supply. Address labels if you want. It's just a nicety, not a requirement. When it comes to cutting the papers, we're going to take them apart or open them up and kind of see what we have. This is obviously all of our arcs. We'll cut each one of those out. These are the background templates, T templates. And this looks like it's an assembly diagram, but it also has a couple pieces on there. And then looks like these are also templates, and these are our B units. So there's no duplicate pages that we have to stack on top of each other. So you don't really need the flower pins for that. It's only 1 sheet each. And so now when we're cutting these out, the units, when you cut out the units, I want you to cut them at least 1/4 inch to 1/8 of an inch outside of this outside line. Don't cut them on the outside line. You want to leave extra paper there. So then when you're finished paper piecing, you can trim them down on the exact outside line. So for now, we're going to cut 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch on the outside of all of these units. And you can tell the difference between a template and a unit when this one says it's actually a unit. These other ones are going to say that they're a background template sheet, or in the case of the solid background ones, it's going to say that it's a T template. And so when you're cutting out the templates, you want to cut those on the dark outside line. To make it easier, so it's not confusing, when you cut out your background template layout sheets and your units, you can cut all of those with 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch on the outside. Now on the T templates, those need to be cut exactly on the outside line, and you want to be real careful when you do that. So let's just put some of these sheets to the side, and we'll start cutting some of our pieces. So, I mean, there's really no rhyme or reason on how to do this other than whatever makes it easier for yourself. So I'm looking at this and I see there's a straight line in between all of these blocks. So I might go ahead and just cut down the middle and cut this into some smaller pieces to make it easier. And then we'll do the same thing here. You can see there's a straight line here with about 1/4 inch in between the blocks, so we can cut about 1/8 of an inch in between, put it right down the middle. And then since these are curved, you're just going to kind of have to freehand it, and I just like to take my ruler and kind of keep about 1/8 inch outside of each arc. And I'll probably go ahead and just keep cutting them apart like this, making sure that you're staying at least 1/8 inch to 1/4 of an inch outside of each line. So I'm not going to torture you by making you watch me cut out every single one of these. So I'll come back when we're on to the next page. We finished up cutting all of our A units, and there should be 6 of each AR, AL, BR, and BL. So I'm going to take my 6 units and I'm going to use my paper clips. Now, with paper clips, you want to make sure you get the large, smooth paper clips. If you get the paper clips that have like those little edges on them, they don't slide as smoothly on and off of the papers and the fabric. So smooth, large paper clips. And you can get those at actually Walmart sells them, any of the office supply stores, like Office Depot, Staples, any of those. Or even you can order them off of Amazon too. You can get a big box of like 100 of them off of Amazon. So once we have all of these grouped together, then we can put them in the appropriate bag, and then we'll get on to the next sheet. So A, L, and B, R, unit AL and unit BR go in the same bag. That's your first bag. And then this unit BL and unit AR, they go into the second bag. All right. And then let's go with our next sheet here. This is a bunch of templates here. So remember I said if you have a template layout sheet, you want to cut those on the solid line. So I'm going to go ahead and use my smaller ruler here and cut this out. And then let's see, we've got a template here. These templates, these are mostly for the C background. For right now, I'm just going to loosely trim them, and when we get to the video about doing the background fabrics and doing the TRP lines, then we'll trim them down to the exact size. So I'm just going to loosely kind of cut around them because I need to get to these smaller templates here for the template layout sheets, but just going to being careful not to cut into the template. These are the ones that you have to cut the fabric pieces out the exact size, so you want to keep these in good shape and try not to cut them or bend them too much. So all of these, they all have a template C5, template C4, C1, C2, C3. They're all going to go in the C bag, which is the next bag in our series. So, I mean, these instructions aren't specific for the Autumn Pines quilt. If you're watching this video and you're thinking about doing another Quiltworx quilt, kind of have to go through the same process. You cut out all the papers, put them in the appropriate bags, and then the next step, which we'll do after all the papers are cut, then you cut your strips of fabric, and we'll follow along in the instructions on that, on what size strip to cut and what bag it goes in. And then when we get to each individual block, we'll come back and subcut the smaller pieces. But for now, we're just gonna cut the big pieces and get it kind of organized and ready to start. If you were to ever go to a retreat, a Quiltworx retreat or anything like that, a lot of times they'll have the kits for you. And what you'll get with the kit is you'll get all of your papers, which you'll have to cut out, and you'll get all your fabric strips. That's a nice thing. They cut all the strips for you. Like if you need, just for instance, if you need 3 5-inch with the fabric strips, they'll already be cut for you. But that's the nice thing about going to a retreat. You pay for your kit, and that's one of the services that you get is the strips cut. I know there's a lot of shops that sell pre-cut kits as well. You can get the kits, and the fabric strips are already cut. All you have to do is cut out the papers and subcut the templates, and then you are on your way to sewing your quilt together. So these are the templates that you're going to cut those wings with, but if you have the Creative Grids ruler, the Creative Grids Diamond Wedding Ring ruler, you won't need to use these pieces. So it's all up to you depending on what you have. But I'll show you how to do it both ways. If you look at the pattern, there's a little miniature layout of these template sheets that we just cut. So we just cut out all of these arcs, and then these are all the templates that we cut out. It will actually tell you in the bag, or on the sheet here, what bag it's supposed to go into. And of course, it just says template C1 through C6 go into bag group C. So we'll do that. I was trying to see where these ones, that's template B1, A2, A1. I'm just going to put those in, I'll put those in the very first bag. And then when we get to our fabrics, so all of these, the template E, template D, C, and there's two template E's, it looks like. Template D and template C. We're going to put that in bag, the first bag, bag AR, BL. And then we've got our, oh, this says on it. So it says unit AL, BL template layout sheet. So we'll put that into the AL, and BL. Okay. And then this is AR and BR. So, okay. And then this one is unit BR and unit BL. So we got to cut that in half. BR and unit BL. All right. So those are all of the A unit pieces. And let me get my stuff together and we'll start on the unit B pieces. On to unit B. So I'm looking at the pattern, and this is page 12. And right here, we already made our Ziploc bags, but I just want to show you Ziploc bags. You need two. There's BL and BR. And then in this, for unit B, there's only one sheet. So we're going to cut this sheet apart and put it in the appropriate bags. And I'll put it on time lapse so you can see me cut these. And then we'll be on to unit C was all those templates. So we're going to go on to unit D, which is the border fabrics. Apologize, guys. I was cutting out all the papers, and I didn't realize that my phone battery was dead. So I cut all the papers and put them in all the bags. So just follow the same instructions. Cut out the units, cut those out an 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch on the outside lines. On the templates, just make sure that you cut on that solid black line and put them in the appropriate bags. Reference your pattern. So since now that we have all of our papers cut and put in the appropriate bags, the next thing I'm going to go over is the fabrics, and we're just going to cut the strips real quick. Thanks so much for watching the video today, guys. I hope that you're enjoying this series so far. Beginner paper piecing series for the Autumn Pines Quilt. This is the first video in the series, and so today we went through the pattern. We cut out the papers, so we put them in the Ziploc bags, and we're ready to start sewing on our units. Yay! So the next video we'll start on unit A. We'll cut those fabrics into the smaller pieces with the templates. If you like this series, you like my videos, learning how to do Quiltworx quilts or learning how to paper piece, please consider subscribing. Give my video a like, it helps me out. Share it with your friends. I'm sure you've got at least one friend that might want to learn how to do a Quiltworx or paper piecing project. Get your papers cut out, and we will see you in the next video, ready to work on those diamond wedding ring arcs, and we'll get this quilt going. It's a fun little quilt. I know it seems kind of daunting, but it's really not that bad. It goes pretty quick. Keep an eye out for some new videos, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Please subscribe to my channel And don't forget to give me a like, drop a comment below, and share with your friends.